Well, it has been a while since we have been in Ultramar, the Ultramarine Stomping Grounds. The last time we were there was, the start of 8th edition, with the Plague Wars, where the Death Guard, led by Primarch Mortarion, attempted to invade and bring the Ultramarines home into Nurgle's realm. That campaign ended in the Death Guard's defeat, and the Ultramarines were freed up to participate in the Nachman Gauntlet, Pariah Nexus, and the 4 Tyrannic War campaigns. The main problem, though, was that Ultramar is kinda big, and its size and the possibility of leftover threats left the door open for us to go back. Now, we're heading back to Ultramar, and the Plague Wars book trilogy set up quite a few things for us. For one, the Tetrarchy. Now, if you're an avid history buff, you know the Tetrarchy was a way for the Roman Empire to rule both the eastern and western sides of their empire. The idea was that there would be 2 emperors, along with their respective heirs, acting as co-rulers and dictating policy for their respective regions, while working together for a greater whole. Guilliman took that idea and basically created 4 seats of power within Ultramar and gave them to 4 Marines he knew could do the job. These 4 are First Company Captain Severus Agerman of the Ultramarines, Captain Decimus Felix of the Ultramarines, Captain Porton of the Genesis subchapter, and Captain Balthus of the Doom Eagle subchapter. The next thing that was set up was that a lot of conflicts within Ultramar were never permanently resolved. Considering that there's now a massive warp tear, acting like an annoying neighbor doesn't help. But there's also the fact that there are several tomb worlds within Ultramar, several orc empires and pirate bases, Tyranid splinter fleets from both the First and Second Wars, and the Tau Empire preparing to expand into said territory. Which means the Ultramarines and their subchapters were inevitably gonna have to fix these problems anyway. Cut to the end of Space Marine 2 and its secret level animated short, to the return of Captain Titus. Games Workshop began to build the Ultramarines up again to prepare us for the next campaign. The 500 Worlds campaign is here, and when I was asked on stream to describe it in one word, I had the immediate answer of fuck. Don't take that as a bad thing, it just means the story took me off guard, and where it was going, and who the main antagonist of the opening salvo was. So, let's get into the 500 Worlds, catch up with Titus and friends, and see how the ancient horrors have come back. Now, the book does make it clear, the 500 Worlds of Ultramar is an exaggeration. There are not literally 500 worlds to conquer, but it does show how big the realm of Ultramar actually is. Now, the realm of Ultramar has existed since even before the Imperium found it. Guilliman basically had his own micro-empire going on before the Emperor and the Imperium arrived, and it was added into the fold pretty neatly. In fact, with the Ultramarines being so well organized and maintained, it was made an exception to the Imperium's rules, and so long as their tithes went to the Ultramarines and later their subchapters, it was pretty much independent of the Imperium. However, over the years, Ultramar has suffered a lot. From the Horus Heresy, when the World Eaters, Word Bearers, and Night Lords rampaged through it, but also the First and Second Tyrannic Wars, and the Deimos incident where the Ultramarines learned that there were a ton of Necron tomb worlds hiding around Ultramar. Then the 13th Black Crusade happened, then the Plague Wars turned several very important worlds into plague planets. Yeah, Ultramar wasn't doing too hot. Though Rabute Guilliman isn't in Ultramar right now, it's not very clear where he is, he has a new plan in action for his Ultramarines to carry out. The Reclamation of the Realm of Ultramar, a campaign to reunite and refortify the 500 Worlds, and make it a bastion for the Imperium. Or maybe a convenient fallback point in case something bad happens. Like, say, some bugs eat terror or something. But that won't ever happen, will it? Either way, the Ultramarines that aren't either stuck fighting in the Nachman Gauntlet or the 4th Tyrannic War have been recalled to Ultramar, along with several of their subchapters. These chapters include the Sides of the Emperor, the Nova Marines, the Avenging Sons, the Sons of Orar, the Doom Eagles, and several other newly formed subchapters. These groups, along with newly raised regiments of the Imperial Guard, called the Ultramar Defense Auxilia, are tasked with several key objectives. 1. To retake or secure planets in Ultramar. 2. Purge any rebelling elements. And 3. Make these worlds productive members of the 500 Worlds. Each of these battle groups were sent to support one of the 4 major war zones, which were divided up into north, south, east, and western sides of Ultramar, called Tetras. The commanders in charge of each of those tetras would be the named Tetrarchs, though it's clear that this campaign was easier to plan out than it was to execute, as everyone began to run into problems immediately. On the northern front, first Captain Agamemnon got bogged down fighting Chaos and Genestealer cults. Captain Porton is doing okay on the southern front, being able to hold what they take, but it's clear that descent on secured worlds is a constant growing issue. As for the eastern campaign, Captain Felix is taking a slower, more defensive approach, focusing on 2 or 3 sectors at a time, taking them, building them up, then moving on. However, this is extremely slow, and Felix has to reassure plenty of worlds, along with the Inquisition and other Imperial officers, that Guilliman isn't trying to usurp power from Terra. On the western front, the Doom Eagle's Captain Balthus has been outpacing his Imperial Guard allies, meaning that although his Marines are conquering world after world, they don't stay conquered for very long. This has led to the western front being bogged down and considered cursed, as the Doom Eagles and their forces have to play a game of whack-a-mole. That basically sets the stage for what's going on within Ultramar. The main story brings back the protagonist of Space Marine 2, Demetrian Titus, now captain of the 2nd Company once again. Now, I know the last time we left him, he was a lieutenant and the 2nd Company was under the command of Captain Akaran. Well, after Titus got back from his secret level episode, he was quickly redeployed back to the 2nd Company and led the defense of an aquatic planet of Hydra's lair. However, another situation popped up on the nearby world of Trig, splitting the 2nd Company in half. Captain Akaran, along with acting Lieutenant Chiron, found out that the capital hive city of Trig was completely taken over by Genestealer cultists. Knowing that the other hive cities had yet to be infected by the cultists, Akaran locked the hive city down in a desperate final stand, destroying any way for the cult to spread at the cost of his and Chiron's lives. Now, to be clear, I wasn't very happy that Akaran and Chiron got killed in a community post, but the campaign does lessen the blow by explaining that they only had half a company to go against a full Genestealer cult uprising. It still sucks we lost Akaran, and especially Chiron, but we had to make way for Titus to become company captain again. Oh well. With Akaran dead, Titus was swiftly promoted to 2nd Company captain. Again, the book does say this is because Marnius Calgar, the chapter master of the Ultramarines, has been favoring him, and the veteran Sergeant Mataris, the guy from the Secrets level episode, was Titus's mentor and one of the longest serving Ultramarines in the chapter, and was vouching for him. Though it is made clear that there's a minority in the chapter that believes Titus should not have been returned to the chapter, let alone promoted. It's not clear if one of these dissenting voices is Chaplain Leandros, though. Now, something interesting about 500 Worlds is that it brings up the responsibilities of Space Marine captains. You see, when Guilliman designed the Space Marine chapter organizations, captains were responsible for more than just taking care of their respective companies. They have other responsibilities, such as taking care of the chapter fleet, organizing the armory, or in Titus's case as 2nd Company captain, being the master of the watch, meaning that his job is to patrol the borders of Ultramar and secure it. This means, at least for this campaign, he's on cleanup duty with his 2nd Company and has to rapidly respond to threats within Ultramar. Which is where our story starts. After being promoted to 2nd Captain, Titus reorganized the 2nd Company into a rapid response force and built a brand new command squad called the Wardens of Ultramar. The new squad included veteran Sergeant Gadriel, Titus's former mentor Mataris, and 4 non-Astartes officers to handle the comings and goings of the Ultrama Exilia, diplomatic personnel, and other things. Titus also upgraded his ship, Righteous Fury, to have more drop pod bays and hangars and new engines, so the ship could respond to new threats in shorter amounts of time. So, the 2nd Company was around the world of Idorus, helping clean up a Tyranid force and a small fleet of bioships. While dealing with the fleet, Titus and his council wanted to figure out if this was a splinter fleet from an already defeated invasion, or the vanguard of a new Tyranid invasion. So, doing a very smart thing, they figured out the path that the bioships came from. Although, it became clear that this was a splinter fleet that they could easily clean up. Something was bugging Titus. Along the predicted path his council was working on, it was clear the Tyranids had avoided the world of Nova Magnor, and the only reason bugs ignore worlds is because it's dead already, or a Necron tomb world is there, and the bugs don't want to deal with it. Seeing this, and knowing that Nova Magnor was behind the secure lines of Ultramar, Titus and his company quickly departed Idorus after cleaning up the bugs. Now, the good news was that the reports from Nova Magnor had shown no signs of the tomb world waking up, and that it was perfectly fine and serene. However, this is 40k. You aren't allowed to have nice and serene places when the protagonists show up. Much better. Yeah, the situation on Nova Magnor changed literally a day or two before Titus and the Second Company arrived, turning from a promising industrial planet to a planet covered in Necron tomb complexes and metal plains. However, just as the Ultramarine fleet settled in high orbit, the fleet detected a Necron tomb ship rising out of Nova Magnor's ocean, and it was heading straight for the fleet. Weirdly though, the tomb ship wasn't firing on the fleet, and it looked like it was heavily damaged from a fight. Titus quickly ordered the Second Company to begin boarding actions, but even more perplexing, the fight aboard the tomb ship was easy. Titus and his command squad fought their way to what they thought was the bridge, but when they got there, it wasn't the bridge, but more of a museum crossed with a lab. The Necron Lord and his Lich Guard were defending a strange artifact, and when Titus and his group entered the area, they launched into a desperate fight. It ended with Titus and his team coming out on top, and the tomb ship was secured, though Titus was weary of the artifact and wanted to blow it up. The lead tech priest of his fleet, named Oct, talked him down from the idea, using the logic of blowing it up might do nothing, or it could make a black hole, or something far worse. So Titus agreed to let Oct take it to the main forge complex on Nova Magnor, while he and the Second Company fought the Necrons on the surface. Things on the planet were even weirder, as Titus met with the planetary governor, who revealed that although the planet has drastically changed and there have been some Necron attacks, the attacks have been extremely small and unorganized. Yeah, the situation on the planet isn't great, and it's clear that the defenders are extremely happy to see the Second Company, but it was relatively under control. With this revelation, and being shown that the main tomb complex's entrance was exposed and undefended, Titus took a play out of the Bloodraven's book and made a plan to deliver a vortex bomb, basically a bomb that opens up a warp hole that sucks things into the heart of the tomb complex before it comes fully online. Getting the vortex bomb, and several tech priests who knew how to arm it, ready, Titus and the Second Company deployed to the tomb's entrance. And here is where this book goes from a campaign book to a fucking horror movie! When they arrived, the tomb's entrance showed signs of battle, but not from the Ultramar Auxilia, or the Nova Magnor PDF. No, the tomb entrance showed deep, claw-like gouges in its foundation, with the repair scarabs and other defenses destroyed. Turning back wasn't an option though, and as the Second Company went further in, it only got more weird and creepy. Deep into the complex, the Second Company ran into a stasis rack for the tomb's Necron warriors. Normally, they would be asleep inside their stasis racks, but it was clear a fight had happened through here, and although the warriors appeared to be awake, they were sprawled out or barely hanging out of their stasis caskets, with Gadriel pointing out that their eyes were flashing in a rhythmic pattern. Titus, taking precaution, ordered his men not to fire on the entranced warriors, worried that if they fired on them, they would have to deal with it now. So the Second Company continued on, entering the main tomb complex, and finally encountering what had invaded the tomb. Without warning, Necron destroyers began to fire in charge at the Second Company. However, as the Ultramarines fought them, Titus recognized that all of these destroyer Necrons weren't from the same dynasty. some were from Sautek, some from Mefrit, and so on. Whatever was happening here wasn't natural, and the one responsible for the weird horror movie shenanigans was a new force being introduced into Warhammer. Necrosaur Amatar, the supposed patient zero of the Necron destroyer virus. Now, even if you are a veteran of 40k, you're probably going, what the fuck is that? And we aren't entirely sure where it came from. The book does call Necrosaur it, not he, she, or they. No one, not even the Necrons, except maybe the Silent King, knows where it came from. What we do know is that Necrosaur is what the Necrons originally were like in older editions of 40k. Silent destroyers and worshippers of the Catan. Yep. For those who loved when the Necrons were silent undead enslaved by eldritch gods, GW has heard your silent cries and revealed that they still exist in 40k. Now, I'll go over the destroyer virus in the Necron video, but to sum it up, it's basically a mental virus that infects a Necron's mind and removes everything but their need to destroy things, making them little more than mindless zombies who need to destroy every living thing in their way. However, where others lose their mind, it's clear that Necrosaur has retained its intelligence and personality, and is able to spread its infection to other Necrons and turn them into a shambling horde that follows it, which explains why the Necron Lord was trying to flee on his tomb ship. He and those he could save were trying to run away, and trying to make sure Necrosaur didn't get its hands on the strange artifact. And here, Titus and his forces got their asses kicked. Necrosaur killed the last tech priest who could arm the bomb, and tore through the assault terminators by simply swiping at them. This led to Titus having to call a retreat. The second company fell back, only to run into the Necron warriors they passed earlier, waking up and trying to attack them, or ripping limbs and weapons off destroyed warriors and adding it to their own bodies, making more and more destroyer units. The second company was able to fight its way out of the tomb, and Necrosaur launched its proper invasion of Nova Magnor, with the infected Necrons swarming out of their tombs to attack Imperial defensive positions and quickly overrunning them. Titus regrouped with the main defense force and counterattacked the Necron surge, but Necrosaur was notably absent, as it made its way towards the forge complex that Tech Priest Oct was in. The book revealed that Oct is a member of the Cult of the Dragon, a cult of the Mechanicus who thinks the Catan are angels of the Machine God, which is why he took the artifact. He was messing around with it because he knew it was a prison for a Catan shard, and was actively trying to communicate with it. Apparently, he never heard the saying, "Don't stick your dick in a toaster," or in this case, your USB port to a Necron Tesseract labyrinth. When he plugged into it, the Catan shard inside managed to communicate with Oct and take control of the idiot, basically telling him to be a good boy and hand the artifact over to its agent when it arrived. And when Necrosaur got there, Oct handed it over, and Necrosaur rewarded the faithful idiot by killing him. To make matters worse, Titus and the Ultramarines barely had any time to regroup and catch their breath when a different fragment of the Nightbringer started pushing towards the capital hive, only for the devastating assault to be cut short as Necrosaur wanted to regroup to deploy its forces for a much larger attack. That attack soon came, with the Necrons surging from each tomb around the planet to overwhelm the already exhausted defenders. However, before this new assault began, Titus and his forces scanned the planet and found out that their vortex bomb was completely untouched within the heart of the tomb. Titus, Gadriel, and Mataris led a three-pronged assault on the main tomb complex again. This time, the operation was on a time crunch though, and Titus's forces knew it. Fighting through extremely rough and devastating resistance, Titus and his group were able to reach the vortex bomb. The company's tech marines activated the bomb and set a timer that barely gave the strike force enough time to get out of the complex in a fighting retreat. They got out in time, and the tomb complex collapsed, making the Necrons lose all momentum in their assault and get slowly pushed back by the surviving defenders. Though the Necrons were stopped, it was clear over the coming days that Necrosaur was nowhere to be found, and it looks like it left well before the final assault. With reinforcements arriving to help clean up the last of the Necrons on the surface, Titus and his forces began helping Nova Magnor rebuild. But Necrosaur's true mission is complete. It left the world with a shard of its god, and is on its way to find more shards, in hopes of reviving the Nightbringer and restoring it to full power. With this new threat out in the galaxy, and Titus now wise to Necrosaur's game, the war for the 500 worlds is far from over. However, before the book comes to an end, we get a message from the Nova Marines. They received a message from the Dark Angels, with clearance codes that date back to the Great Crusade. Hell, the tech priest receiving the message got scared it was a fake, but it was genuine. The message was from Lion L. Johnson, Primarch of the Dark Angels, and the message reads, "Brother, we need to talk." 500 Worlds is not only an update to the Warhammer storyline and a Where Are They Now story, it also means to introduce the new format for GW to bring these books out. Yeah, the campaign books usually had all of their content in one hardcover book, but now the book is split into 3 different ones. One for the story, one for the Crusade rules and missions, and another for the boarding action style missions that are growing in popularity among Warhammer fans. Basically, boarding actions are small skirmish style games that simulate fighting aboard ships, space hulks, and space stations. The major things here were what happened to Titus after Space Marine 2, who was the new Necron character, and the surprise of the Lion and the Dark Angels rushing towards Ultramar. The story definitely reads as an Ultramarine win, but it's clear that Necrosaur got its win by getting what it wanted, then leaving. Though its arrival was a major tone shift in the book, making it go from a short horror story to a desperate fight against an eldritch god and its agent of destruction. To be frank, Necrosaur is a refreshing addition to Warhammer. In the story, the thing clearly acts like a zombie or a rage virus that infects its fellow Necrons, turning them into mindless destroyers or flayed ones, while on the tabletop, it's a terrifying murder tornado that buffs destroyer units while also being untargetable so long as it stays close to those destroyer units. So clearly, it's meant to be supporting ranged destroyers or charging the line with melee destroyers as a missile of death. Its release also brought in a new model for the Nightbringer, a model that desperately needed the update. Now can we update the Deceiver and Trazen, please? Now, the next event to come out is the Tyrant's Lair, where we will finally learn the mysteries of the Maelstrom Zone and see a small conflict between the Red Corsairs and Prince Uriel's Eldar Corsairs. So if you want to see that story breakdown early, subscribe to the Patreon. You not only get to see my content a week or so early, but you also get to see an exclusive series of model and unit breakdowns. However, if you don't have the funds, don't stress. Just like, comment, share this video, and subscribe. Those help keep the lights on and help me keep making these videos for you. But, until then, I'll see you all next time.